Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the technique Darting Mace and some of the more important principles, rules, theories, concepts, and strategies of this technique. So let's talk about this scenario that we're put in, or the concept behind this technique. So Kenpo teaches us how to deal with people that are more skilled than us. The way we say it is as skilled or more skilled than ourselves. And in this case, as strong or stronger than ourselves. So let's get into that a little bit. So the attack here is this two-hand grab. So this is kind of interesting because of the fact that they're doing 2 against 1, which by definition gives them a strength advantage. So there is a very quick way that we can deal with this technique because we may be at a strength disadvantage, but we're at a strategic advantage. The way to think about that is they've occupied 2 of their weapons, including their primary, major, and minor from the top, and they're left us with 3. So we could easily deal with this opponent by just doing the end of this technique pretty much first, by just hitting and hitting again. And we'll get into how that works later. But remember, Kenpo teaches us the long version of the technique. So the reason why we're doing the long version of the technique is to get into the subtlety of how to deal with a scenario like this, not just immediately retaliate. But given a read on the situation, you can do the end of the technique first, and then leave out all the middle of the technique. But what we want to do in this video is discuss how we're dealing with this technique and the way to think about how to deal with this technique. Okay, so we're at the strength disadvantage here because they've grabbed us with both of their hands and potentially are bigger than us and may actually be stronger than us. They're confident enough to use both of their hands, so we have to deal with that scenario. So the reason, or the way to think about this, is the fact that we are going to be manipulating, but we're going to do it in a somewhat unique way. Rather than mostly manipulating the opponent, we are going to be manipulating ourselves. So let's talk about how we're dealing with this grab. The standard way we deal with a grab is we go to a weak spot. So in this case, the thumb. Either one of the hands, notice we always go to the thumb. But what do we do if we have 2 hands like this? We no longer have a weak spot on the thumb. But we do have a weak spot down the middle. But if you'll notice, the alignment of my hand here means I'm going to have to pull up at a very awkward angle. So what do I need to do? I need to manipulate myself by settling, in this case, anchoring my elbow and settling my weight such that I'm changing the alignment of their hand so that I can pull straight out or go to the weak spot down the middle. So mostly I'm manipulating myself, somewhat manipulating my opponent. So the way we talk about this is alignment in Kenpo. So what we're doing is aligning things so that we can get proper execution of things. So that's my right hand and my weight, but what about my left hand? Remember, I still have this left hand available to us. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to basically be punching this opponent in their face to hurt and cause distractions to keep their eyes off of, or their mind off of what's going on here with their hands, so that we can then pull our hand out. And we'll get into that as we go forward. The important part here is how I'm executing this left hand. Remember, alignment. So we have this concept of over-rotation. So what is that? If you notice, I'm going to extend my finger so you can see it. If I wanted to hit this opponent, I have a tendency to over-rotate by trying to extend this arm, but notice what's happening with my finger. I want to punch this opponent in my face, but I'm not pointing at their face. So the better way to think about this is that I'm going to do the forward forearm, but I'm going to do it in such a way that I'm still pointing at the opponent. Therefore, economy of motion. I don't want to have to over-rotate and rotate back to the proper alignment and then continue. What I want to do this is in one fell swoop so that I can do the hit and the punch, or in other words, distraction through pain, all at the same time. Now, what we're going to be ending up here with is a vertical punch. And the reason why we're going to do that vertical punch is because we want to fit into the mask area here. I may be diverting a little bit, but the general idea here is to go into the philtrum area, the bridge of the nose, or even potentially under the chin in order to get them to push back. Under the chin is good because we get outside of their cone of vision, but the other ones may force them to close their eyes or water their eyes and break their nose. Regardless, the strategy is the same. What am I trying to do? Again, I'm trying to take their mind off of what's going on here with the hands because they're potentially stronger than us. So if I were to just try and pull my hand out, if you'll notice what's happening here is I don't have a brace. So, or a backing in this case. Another way to think about it is this is what the left hand is doing. It's creating a brace so I can push and pull using opposing forces and pull my hand out. Okay? That is all basically darting mace. Okay? What about the rest of the technique, the ideal phase of the technique? We call this a standard extension. So what is a standard extension? A standard extension is basically position recognition, and it recognizes the fact I can do a repetitive series that I already know beforehand and execute it. So in this case, that standard extension is the punch, the chop in the knee, and the heel palm. Okay? Just like we did at the beginning of the technique, we're showing you the long version, or the standard version, or the ideal version of this standard extension. But let's get into some of the options and the idea of what's going on in the standard extension. The way to think about this standard extension is I've freed myself up. So now what I want to do is continually hit this opponent with continuous weapons. And I also want to gauge them so that I can dispatch them. So the way I'm going to do this is basically by gauging with this left hand, stepping through and heel palming them off. So I no longer have to deal with them. But remember, we're showing you the long version, so we're showing you all the options. So the way we do it in the actual extension itself in the technique is the fact that we're doing both these hands at the same time, hand and leg at the same time, and then the step through. So if you notice the way I did it is the way you should not be doing it in actual execution. So what did I do? I stopped my forward momentum. In other words, I changed the timing of the technique such that I stopped and then started my momentum at the same time. The way to think about the way the execution of this technique works is I'm just going to do a step through in a heel palm. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk through some of our potential options here that we can do with this standard extension. So we get to this point, we get our hand out, and let's say I hit low because he's taller or something like that, and I get my hand out. Well, we have a general rule that says don't keep hitting the same spot and continuously try and mix up the strikes. So in this case, if I was to hit here at the beginning, get my hand out, well, guess what? I probably would want to go high and then continue through with the extension rather than punching at the same time. And with that, I can also bring in the concept of hardness of weapon to hardness to target. I could do a punch here, or I could do a heel palm and then add the punch at the end. Switch those up. Let's talk through another potential option with this hand in the knee. Let's say I get to this point, I hit him in the face. I can keep my hands on top here and punch. Well, what happens if I begin to hit him in the face and he brings his hand up? Well, guess what? I no longer can do this as my major gauge. It will become a minor gauge. That means I now have to move on to my knee as I begin to do this step through and hit. So keep in mind, knees are basically extended step throughs. So I don't have to do them, as you saw in some of the options I did, but in this case, now it becomes a major piece of my standard extension. The other potential is that I don't have to do anything with the knee. I get into here and I just do the step through and hit. Then again, as we said, we can switch things up as we see fit. And that all brings in the formulation equation. So all this stuff for reading the situation is changed up through the formulation equation. So let's end this with the final piece that we have to talk about here is that we disengage with the opponent. So we're left in a situation where we are no longer in a fight. But keep in mind the concept of environmental awareness. What I want to do is make sure there's nobody else in my environment. So what I want to do is I want to do a cross out and cover. So now I have 360-degree awareness of what's going on. So now that we've talked through this technique, let's do a quick demonstration so that you can see it being executed. Hope this video helps you understand the American Kenpo system just a little bit better. Thank you very much.